When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
I'm Justine McIntyre. We're back with the Elias Makos Show, sitting in for Elias Makos today. So as you know, September 30th, I mentioned it right at the top of the show. Today is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This day comes out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations, and since 2021 has been a federal holiday. It's a day of remembrance for the Indigenous children who never came home from Canadian residential schools, as well as those who survived them. So I'm very pleased today that we have as our guest on this show a woman who is an artist, a documentarian. She's an Indigenous land defender, Ellen Gabriel. She's known for her involvement. Also, we might know her mostly for her involvement as an official spokesperson during the Oka crisis. And she's recently received the Grand Prix of the Montreal Conseil des Arts for her documentary, When the Pine Needles Fall. So welcome to the show, Ellen.
Sago, thank you for having me.
My pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope that I gave a correct introduction for you. I know that one of the things that you've said, for example, is about the Oka crisis, is you've said that it was mistakenly known as the Oka crisis. Maybe you can just give us a little information about that.
Okay, well, Oka, first the municipality of Oka caused the siege. It was a siege. Two communities, Kahnawake included, were attacked. And it's Oka that caused the crisis or the siege. And it's also a lack of goodwill and faith by the Canadian government that caused the centuries-old land dispute that we've had. So it was Kanesatake and Kahnawake that were under siege. And the people, the Quebecois people in the municipality of Oka, were the ones responsible behind the whole issue of the land dispute and the golf course expansion. That we had no rights. So just want to correct it. It's the Mohawks that were under siege.
Okay, so the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, as I said at the beginning, it's a day of remembrance for the children who came through the Canadian residential school system, but also a lot of the conflict between First Nations and Canada has been about land issues. Is that something that is still? Do you feel that that's something that is still creating tension and is still one of the main issues that we should be talking about today?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the whole issue of the genocidal policies of Canada and the churches, was to dispossess us of our land. And in order to do that, they had to get rid of the Indian problem, as Duncan Campbell Scott said, and John A. Macdonald. So in order to do that, the RCMP kidnapped children and took them to these Indian residential schools. It became law for all of Indigenous children to be in school, or the parents would be arrested and they would take the children away. So some children never returned home because they were murdered at these Indian residential school systems. So the issue of land is really coming into a dominant part of the unmarked graves, in that many churches and many institutions are not cooperating. The government of Canada and the churches are getting rid of evidence. And so the lands on some of them where the churches have sold land are in private hands, but they are not willing to allow, the ground penetrating radar to be accessed by people who are families of these young children who never came home. So it's a very complex, multi-layered issue. But the whole point of the Indian residential school system was to put us onto the reserves, take us away from our homelands, And in order to succeed in us accepting this, they stole the children, and some never came home.
And so, okay, in light of everything that you've just spoken about there, this is what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission set out to bring to light. And do you think that there's been any progress since then, since this information has come to light? I mean, we've seen certain actions on the part of the government. We've definitely seen a lot of statements of just acknowledgement statements about some of the crimes that were committed against Indigenous families and so on. How do you evaluate the progress that's been made since the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
Well, it depends on what you call progress. I think a lot of it is just rhetoric to placate the constituents of politicians. I think there's more, just as it was after the 1990 siege, people became aware that Indigenous people actually existed. And I think it's a very slow trickle into that's permeating into Canadian society to take interest into the Indian residential school system as a genocidal act and a crime against humanity, because there are forced disappearances of children, as Kimberly Murray, the special interlocutor for the unmarked graves, has stated. Forced disappearance has different legal connotations, but the fact that there has been no criminal prosecution of the perpetrators of these crimes against Indigenous children speaks to the lack of goodwill by the provinces, Canada, and the municipalities. I think progress maybe is more in individuals, but society as a whole, we still see the same sort of racist tropes being used about Indigenous people. And the fact that the Canadian government is willing to get rid of all the court records that could help families of survivors find their loved ones, to have all the evidence destroyed, I think that's very telling of how genuine these nice flowery words said by Prime Minister Trudeau or other elected officials, in that at the end of the day, they are still resisting to tell the truth. They are still trying to erase the truth by not including it in curriculums and simply by not allowing access to researchers to the records of churches or institutions or government records, and finding out the truth of the genocide that happened against Indigenous peoples here on Turtle Island.
Okay, Ellen, I think we can agree that it is very important to have access to documentation, and certainly I would hope that our government is not involved in getting rid of any documentation. I can't say that I've seen any evidence of that, so I can't
you can doubt me all you like. Stephen Harper, it was shown during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission when it was still active. They had to get court orders so that Stephen Harper government would not destroy more court records. Kimberly Murray, if you look at her report or interim report that came out in June or July, that talks about the challenges, and the government of Canada is indeed willing to destroy court records. So there's a fact for you. And there's churches who are unwilling to cooperate. So acts of genocide are a crime against humanity, and the fact that the Canadian government is not cooperating means that they are furthering the genocide that has happened against Indigenous people.
Ellen, Gabriel, just in closing, what would you want to see the government do moving forward, or society as a whole, Canadian society?
Well, first of all, to get the history of Canada's genocidal acts against Indigenous people to be put into the educational curriculum at all levels. Do what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations, which is every lawyer, judge, teacher, social worker, hospital worker, everyone should learn about that history, and that it should be a crime to deny that the Indian residential school system happened or that there are unmarked graves. There should be an Indigenous legal framework to protect the sites that are being desecrated right now because of development. So there's a lot of things, and I think people just need to refer to Kimberly Murray's report because it's an excellent report.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, and thanks so much for speaking with us today, Ellen.
You're very welcome. Have a good day. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Pleasure.